For new entrepreneurs, I'd say be very knowledge thirsty. Have an unquenchable desire to learn both related topics and discrete, very unrelated topics.
Our featured speaker today is the inventor and founder behind Think and Zoom Brain Control for Blind Assistive Tech, the co founder and developer of Cowo Credit, winner of the 2020 Mass Challenge Health Tech Startup Choice Award, an AI for Good evangelist to the United Nations. Zuby, it's such a pleasure to have you today as our featured guest. Thank you so much for being willing to share your journey with us.
Thanks so much, Nancy and Spencer and Founders Voyage community for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you want to kick us off with a little bit about you, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion, that would be awesome.
Sure. I guess I can start from right after I came to America. I came here with $200 in a duffel bag and a dream of becoming a medical doctor, and quickly realized that I was missing three significant zeros to my 200, as medical school cost $200,000. And so, to thank the country that was giving me the great opportunity, that gave me a green card, I won a visa lottery to get here. I enrolled in the military, so I was in the Illinois Army National Guard right after I started pre med. And I was a teenager, and I thought I had life figured out and everything planned out. But within 2 years of my service and medical studies, I became legally blind. So that means that I went from seeing the eye chart from 20 feet away to about 1 foot away within 2 years. This was caused by a disorder that affects the retina. It's called Stargardt's, is a form of macular degeneration, and it's not the age-related macular degeneration, even though they have similar symptoms. It's juvenile. This is genetic, and so you can't fix it. So it cannot be corrected with surgery or prescription or contact. And so that ended my military career. But at the same time, all this was going on, my eyes kept misbehaving literally, and I actually flunked out of school. That was the semester of 9/11. So that's something that sits in my memory because the nation and, quite frankly, the global scene was already in a gloom at that time. That was right after the dot-com bubble bust, where capital was drying up from all these startups, and then 9/11 hit. So everybody was already feeling the pinch, and then now my eyes took a huge decline, and I had 2 days to clear my stuff out of the dorm room. I was kicked out and homeless. So I had to stay out like a year and come back to school and reapply all over again before they accepted me, and I finished up. And then after graduating, I got a job at IBM. So now I left Chicago and moved to Austin, Texas. Now I was responsible for IBM's Unix computing systems. I was responsible for file systems and serving clients like Bloomberg and the White House, and I even worked on Lord of the Rings. And so with file systems, you have to make sure that the client's files are always available 247, 365, no downtime allowed. The experience that the client should have is the experience you have when you turn on your Netflix and it's working seamlessly from your mobile phone or your tablet all the way to your laptop, whether you're using the web or the application all the way to your TV. And so those systems, like NASA as a client, you can't have downtime. It's mission critical systems. I was doing that, and then in a couple of years, my eyes again took another deep turn. And so I had to leave my new engineer job and go to the School for the Blind in Austin, Texas, called Chris Cole, CRISSCOLE, Chris Cole. And I spent about a year there learning non-visual skills. So I do have a white cane. I know how to use it. I trained throughout downtown Austin and learned all the streets in downtown Austin. And I remember one morning I walked into traffic around 9 a.m. and stopped traffic. Very busy road, almost downtown. So, it wasn't easy. It was a very stressful period, learning how to get on public transportation and you're totally blindfolded. You can't see even a tiny hint of sunlight. Learn how to cook and started learning assistive tech, things like screen readers and magnifiers. And I finished and went back to work, but my vision again kept declining. And I never stopped my personal research of hopping from one eye care professional to another. I recall one particular incident where I went to meet an eye care professional and the eye test I was given, it was as if it was a plunger, like literally the shape of the plunger that's you use in the restroom. That was what was put on my eye. But before that, it was he had to put a gel so my eyes wouldn't shut, and then he put this plunger thing, but it's literally like a pair of contacts with a tube. And so now my eyes are like wide open. You can't blink. There's no moisture, and then there are electrodes protruding from your eyes so you could measure electric impulses across the eyes. It wasn't fun, going through all of those experiences. And then back in 2012, after I had gone through about 300 of these eye care professionals, I spent 2 weeks at Johns Hopkins, and we discovered that I was having all these chaotic problems because I have three identified genetic mutations. The gene is actually the ABCA4 gene. And two of those mutations do give rise to Stargardts. And there are four kinds of Stargardts. And then the third mutation gives rise to cone rod dystrophy. So, in technical terms, I actually have three different genetic eye disorders. To people who, may not understand what that experience is like or may not understand medical terminologies, think about a car that doesn't have battery and doesn't have gasoline. How is that car going to move? Right? That's what the experience is like when all of these genetic disorders are fighting to kill the very same eye cells, killing off the photoreceptor cells, the rod and cone cells. And they're not doing it with some kind of predefined protocol. Both of them could hang on to the same cell and are tugging at it. And meanwhile, I'm suffering. That's what it's like. And it's very, very disruptive. It creates a scenario where planning for the future becomes heavily unpredictable because you can do all the planning and wake up in the morning and everything goes south. And you never know what one morning will be versus the next. And so, shortly after that experience, the day to day engineering activities got too much. I mean, I remember days where I live in a place where the sun is out 99% of the time, but yet I have huge photophobia. So, photophobia is where all light sources become your enemy. There's massive visual input, and so it's very annoying and very uncomfortable. Think about somebody waking you up at 4 a.m. in the morning, it's the dark, and somebody putting a touchlight right in front of your face. How comfortable that is. That's what photophobia feels like. Every light source feels extremely amplified, and it's tough to navigate it. And I have to walk to the office and walk back. And even though in my office I could sit there in the dark for 8 hours, zero lights, just the computer light. But then I still have to leave the office and go home. So it got too tough. So I left. I left and I started focusing on solving some of the challenges that I was personally facing. That was my first quest. The challenge was the unpredictable nature of the visual impairment, where you cannot tell what's coming, from 1 hour to the next, the constant fluctuations, just that unstable nature of it. So I wanted to create a solution that could detect the visual struggle at all times on demand and then respond immediately, automatically, without me having to do anything. This was because all around me, the assistive technologies, so those assistive technologies for the blind, they come in flavors of magnifiers that make whatever you're looking at much larger so you can see it, or screen readers that convert whatever text you're looking at to audio so you can hear it. So either one of those, you have to manually operate it. So that means you have to hold it with your hand and you have to use your hands to control it. To me, the natural way of seeing is quite seamless. You simply look and you see. Nobody holds their eyeballs with their hands, or controls their eyeballs with their hands. So I wanted to create that seamless experience for those who are visually impaired. And so I knew I had to find something that could seamlessly go in front of somebody's eyes, and then something else that could be the detector that could detect fluctuating or declining vision, and then automatically send a signal to respond. So these were all the thoughts that were going through my head when I came up with the idea of Think and Zoom. Thank goodness that Google Glass came up with the smart glass, so I didn't have to build that. I used to sketch designs of what it would look like, but I also knew it would be very expensive to go and prototype those things. So as soon as Google Glass came out, I bought a pair for $2,000 almost, and then I discovered neuroscience, and I said, "Wow, okay, so I can actually tap into human brainwaves to put this all together." So, how neuroscience and control of brain-computer interfaces (BCI), how it all works is due to the fact that inside of our cranium, inside of our brain, we have billions of neurons. And these neurons communicate with each other via electrical impulses, and those communications give rise to everything we do, our thoughts, our behavior, our mannerism, everything about us. But because of the fact that they're communicating with electrical impulses, we can also tap into those electrical impulses and then leverage computing to understand what the data means. For instance, this week, Elon Musk showed a video of his company, Neuralink, where they are using 1,000 channels. You can think of it as 1,000 sensors, but it is implanted into the brain of I think it's a monkey, a primate. The monkey is able to play a very simple video game, Pong. Just move the ball into a square or something like that. But he's doing it just by thinking. That's it, and it's very smooth. So that's the power of what neuroscience and what brain control interfaces can do. Now Neuralink is doing it invasively with deep surgery into the brain. But what Think and Zoom is doing is non-invasive. We're just leveraging for now off-the-shelf BCIs to simply tap into brain waves and help people to look, think, and zoom in to see better. And so that's how our vision of the company came about, creating a world where visual impairment no longer steals dreams or kills careers. And our mantra is to allow people to be able to look, think, and zoom into a better, brighter future. So that's my story.
And what a story it is. Thanks so much, Zuby. You took us through so much in such a short period of time. I really appreciate it. I was wondering if I can rewind you just a little bit and ask you to describe a little bit more about, some of your early experiences growing up, some of the events and mentors that influenced who you became, influenced you personally and professionally. If there were any in particular that helped you sort of decide what career path to choose.
Growing up when I was in primary school, which was in Nigeria, I received a booklet of science series. And I liked it. I gravitated towards it. And they had experiments in it. But the only experiment I could conduct was the one in physics. So it had you grab a battery that had two ends, and then you grab a copper wire, wrap it around a piece of nail, and then strip off the ends, place each end to each end of a battery, and then find like a paper clip, and then you can touch the paper clip, and you've just created an electromagnet. And I can never forget that experiment. That was my very first experiment. And, I just got hooked on science. It started forming the foundation of why I wanted to do something in the sciences and why I wanted to become a medical doctor. I do have an uncle who's an anesthesiologist. He was the person I looked up to in terms of being a medical doctor. But that didn't work out. And then I started discovering other people who were very creative and inventive, like a George Washington Carver, and all the work he did by researching in plants, and his research spawned things like from cross pollination to peanut butter to so many products like rubber. I even read an article that during his time Henry Ford had offered him $100,000 salary, and this was like early 1900s, and he turned it down. So when the medical side didn't work out, I now focused more on just leveraging science and technology's tools to solve problems, and that has been what I've been doing since.
That's awesome. I really do appreciate hearing about those sorts of like experiments you do at a young age and give you that enthusiasm for science. I definitely have a couple of things that I did at a similar age where I got the same sort of enthusiasm for creating things as an engineer from them. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about was the boot camp. I believe you attended class two.
What prompted me was initial prototype for Thinking Zoom. Someone asked me, well, what are you going to get into the hands of people? I hadn't had the thoughts that 90% of the person next door, people you meet on the street, their responses are the SBA themed traditional entrepreneurship, like, go to the bank and get a loan and things of that nature. They're not talking about VC backed kind of entrepreneurship. And that's how I started. I think I started going to hackathons, meetups, and then I saw EDX and Entrepreneurship 101 and 102 out of there. And through there, got invited to the MIT Entrepreneurship Bootcamp by Bill Olet and Elaine Chan, etc. And that's how I got there. And I still remember how Bill Olet looked at me and asked me, "Hey, Zuby, how you going to change the world?" And, I was astounded. And I'm like, why didn't somebody ask me this question 20 years earlier? I could have started earlier. It was a great experience learning about the 24 steps. For the life of me, I could never memorize that stuff, but I understand some of it now. Cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value of your customer. What can you do for your customer? Who is your customer? The persona. Yeah, that baffled me for a while. Like, why do you have to create this persona? But now I get it. You gotta have a homogeneous crowd that you're tailoring your solution to, and that will be the people where your revenues are coming from, and some of your early adopters. So yeah, I really appreciated that entire experience to the extent that I over some time now done co-organized a meetup where we talk about technology and entrepreneurship topics here to women and minorities. So since then, I started my quest for learning entrepreneurship. Now, at the time I did the program at MIT, that was my very first exposure. So a lot of the things flew over my head. I just it didn't sink in at that time. So I just went about and started getting more of it. After that, I went to Harvard Business School under Professor Clayton Christensen, who sadly passed away last year, and he wrote the book "Innovator's Dilemma" that inspired Steve Jobs. So learning about disruptive strategies from him was just mind blowing. The concepts of job to be done and how people don't buy products, but more they hire products and services to do a needed job for them. Concepts like how to avoid disruption, how to build a moat around your castle. It was just phenomenal because it was this nice blend of business and technology. So that was awesome. And then after that, I did some more programs. I was fortunate to be accepted into the very popular NSFI Core, National Science Foundation Innovation Core. And that focused on performing customer discovery and development process. So the whole goal is who's your first customer, find your 10 customers. That's when I realized that I was extremely very uncomfortable with interviewing people. My bones almost jumped out of my skin. But, it was good to at least find that out in real life, not just reading books. And there are great books like The Mom Test and Talking to Humans and other books. But this was, they force you to really go out and find people and set up one-on-one interviews. They don't even like the phone interviews. You have to go and sit in front of somebody and ask them questions and ask them open-ended questions and try to extract information. It was, man, it was something else. And then, oh yeah, did the inaugural MIT Harvard Medical School healthcare innovation. That was mind opening. I mean, my eye opening. Sorry, because the healthcare industry in America is just, it's just a spaghetti mess. Start learning about all the policies that affect some of the things we come to deal with every day, like health insurance. you know. And then after that, last year, I was accepted into Harvard Business School executive for venture capital and private equity. And I wanted to do that program because I had applied to so many different programs and gotten rejected. So I wanted to understand how these people who write checks make decisions. And so that's why I did that program. And I learned about how even the VCs themselves are basically entrepreneurs, since they have to go and raise money from bigger buckets of money held by limited partners called, LPs, things like retirement accounts and pension accounts, etc. And so their job is to take that money and grow it within a cycle of 5 to 7 years and return it back. And they grow it by deploying it to startups. And so they have to perform some due diligence and look at how big the startup is going to grow and how soon they can either IPO or get acquired so that they can in turn return back the capital that they got and also take their own 20% carried interest, which is how they make money. So it's been a few years of intense learning of entrepreneurship, technology, innovation, and commercialization.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you taking us through some of the pains you went through in, identifying your market. Your takeaways not just from the boot camp programs, but some of the other programs that you've found valuable. Shifting gears just a little bit, I wanted to go back to Think and Zoom, and Joel had a question for you, kind of technical about what brainwave you're actually using. Wondering if you could describe that a little bit for us that are technical and maybe us that are laymen as well.
So Joel is a neuroscientist, so that's why he's interested in particular brainwave. And there's alpha, beta, theta, gamma, and I guess there's one more. But Joel, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I didn't focus on the brain. I focus on applying the neuroscience. So I focus on what the brain computer interfaces can do for me. I purposely haven't gone into in-depth study of neuroscience because I simply wanted to stay on the application layer. So what I do is I look at a BCI sensor and I figure, is it one channel, four, 16, etc. And then what is the quality of data that I can get out of it? And with that data, what can be achieved out of it? Like I mentioned, that you see this primate, this monkey playing Pong very smoothly, but it's got 1,000 channels, right, implanted directly into the brain tissue through surgery. So that gives it that smooth experience. There's also been another case out of UC Irvine where an electrode was implanted into the brain of a patient. I believe it's the parietal cortex, post-parietal cortex, the PPC part of their brain. So it's inserted deep into their brain. The patient, is an amputee, but with a prosthetic, they're playing rock, paper, scissors and playing ping pong, and having very smooth motion. So I just focus on the available sensors. What am I able to do with them? And I focus on disability. I focus on primarily blind population, and then I cast my net wider than that. I hope that's a good enough answer.
Absolutely. I think it's great to sort of hear about your motivations as well as your focuses.
Hi, Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by VidOps. Kane at VidOps has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to VidOps for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code Voyage. That's vidops.io, referral code Voyage. Now back to the show.
One thing that I was hoping to get sort of a little bit more of your perspective on, since you've worked on so many different things, how you sort of tell, A, when you've got an idea in something that you're interested in working on, how you tell when you want to actually pursue it, and B, when you tell that, you're happy with something as it is and you've got a bit more bandwidth to move on to another project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get permission from anybody or ask anybody any questions. I just do what I want to do. And it's great from a user innovation perspective, but sometimes not so great from an entrepreneurship perspective. One example is the Kawa credit. I was in a country where to make calls, you have to buy cards. They were paper cards, and the card will have a code, scratch code. You scratch out something, and then you see the code. And when you enter the code in your phone, then all of a sudden your phone had minutes. Then you can make a call. So at night, the vendor for the card had gone home, wasn't around. And I thought to myself that if there was an emergency, I'd be in trouble because I didn't have any minutes on my phone. So when I came back to America, I said, okay, let me create a very easy to use interface. I didn't do any research or anything. I just encountered a personal problem and I responded by creating an Android application that had a very easy calculator like interface. And so the user would just enter an amount that they wanted, and behind the scenes it's connecting them to their bank, and at that time banks could vend minutes to you. And so that put in a very easy to use interface, and you could buy airtime at any time. But I didn't perform any research. Now, when I wanted to now decouple the connection between the bank vending minutes to actually now go to the telecom to buy the minutes in bulk, I ran into hurdles because I couldn't make any connections. Now, if I had done the research and run into those hurdles first, maybe I wouldn't have done the application. But hey, I did the application. It was 250, number 250 fintech in the Google Play Store. So I was happy about it. So that's how I process things. I'm able to quickly pull off MVPs, but with the knowledge I have now on entrepreneurship, I now know that if you really want the thing to get into the market and stay there for the long haul, there's due diligence that needs to be performed, there's research that needs to be performed so that you can have that out there for the long term.
Thanks so much. I'm actually really glad that you took the opportunity to talk about Cabo Credit as part of that question, because I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about it. And I really appreciate that you said you do what you want to do. I honestly really respect that boldness. And I think that's part of the pirate part of entrepreneurship that Bill describes. Paired with that, you are a person that devotes, your time and energy to advocacy, which is also something I really respect. I'd really like to, understand a little bit more about what you'd like to see accomplished in particular. I saw that you've lobbied as a disability advocate to US Congress for better policies on behalf of blind Americans, and you're an AI good evangelist to United Nations. So what is the big goal with that? I guess I want to ask.
With disability, there are humongous challenges. I'm looking at disability from innovation perspective, and so I always try to promote that. I'm not a policymaker, I'm not a politician. I'm not a musician. I gravitate to what I'm most familiar with. And that's what I try to offer. The case I'm trying to make is that if we have more disabled people who are at the forefront of designing, creating, producing, making decisions about the products and services that disabled people use, then it will create a better society and a better community for not just the disabled people, but a more inclusive society at large. And so, to that end, I started a media arm called Future of Disability. This will be the third year that I've been publishing names of disabled innovators. So I heavily push disability innovation and disabled user innovators. And some of the names I've published include Ralph Teeter, who invented the cruise control that most cars have. Most people know what cruise control in a car does. But Ralph Teeter was a blind mechanical engineer. So what if Ralph Teeter didn't do that cruise control in all cars? Or somebody like Vint Cerf. We're using Vint Cerf's technology to talk right now. The HTTP protocol, which is the backbone of the TCP/IP of the internet. Vint is hard of hearing, and he created that solution so he could have a text-based medium with which to communicate with his family. And there are so many other amazing innovators. People like Yuma, who is a blind developer that has created a very accessible, easy to use star navigation application that even the blind can use to find new stars and new planets. And it's already won an award at NASA. And people like Adriana, who's also on the call, and she has cerebral palsy and leverage her innovative skills to create a solution that can enable people to use their tongue to be able to control electronic devices like their smartphone, tablets, or their laptop. And so the case I'm trying to make is if we are able to identify more people like this crowd, if we're able to encourage more people like this, then empower them and give them the resources they need, then in turn, the assistive technologies that the civil community leverages will actually help them to do more, produce more. One recent use case or success case is the Nike Flywear shoes, which is very popular, developed by Nike, but it was actually developed for people with disabilities. But Nike is a multi-billion dollar company, and so they did all the needful innovation techniques to be able to make sure that the end product has a mass appeal, right? So now you have this product that was really aimed for disabled people, but now it has mainstream crossover appeal and everybody is enjoying it. So the question is, why can't most assistive tech products be that way? So that's, the area that is close to home for me, being a computer engineer and being somebody that just likes to leverage STEM tools and solving problems. And that's the aspect of disability that I try to make a case for.
Thank you so much. I think that very well sort of links into what I was hoping to ask about next in regards to how you've seen the entrepreneurial landscape in assistive tech evolve over time and where you would like to see it evolve next. So you've just said how you'd want it to be designed around mass appeal. Are there other key factors that you think the assistive tech entrepreneurial landscape should focus on?
I think more places that enable people who want to work on assistive tech, things like accelerators or incubators or venture studios, or even maybe schools, universities. We need more of those places. The ones that I know, to my knowledge, there's one that just started in India last year. There's Global Disability Hub out of the United Kingdom. There's A3I in Israel and also Tom Global in Israel. Remarkable out of Australia. America is kind of missing. I think there's a HERL lab for wheelchairs out of University of Pennsylvania, I think, or Pennsylvania area. But for such a massive country like the United States, It's just a big gaping hole, right? You would think that there should be at least 10 centers dotting, all corners of the country, but they aren't. From my perspective, I think that if these centers existed and were resourced, empowered, it will in turn accelerate the development of assistive technologies to meet the community's demands. We're now in the 21st century. We're now in the fourth industrial revolution where systems are talking to systems. But you can, look around assistive tech products and maybe they've come into the third, but they're always lagging behind a decade or two. And so in a time where the pace of change of technology is really accelerating in any direction you want to look at, NFT, bioprinting, 4D printing, whichever area you want to look at, whether you're digging into the earth with the boring company and hyperloops, or whether you're doing logistics vertically and shuttling things into outer space with SpaceX. In any direction, the disability community still feels that pinch where their solutions are lacking, and I think having centers dedicated to accelerating these innovations and bringing in specialists with innovation skills to apply the greatest and best of innovation so that the end solutions can truly serve the disabled user. From my perspective, I think that's severely missing.
I really appreciate you being so specific with that answer. I'm excited to know you and others that are like Adriana that are so passionate about assistive tech, and I look forward to finding out how we can kind of help you connect with people to further that mission in the future. So, I wanted to ask you, given your range of different perspectives from multiple projects you've done, are there any sort of lessons on entrepreneurship you think aren't well known to people that are just getting started? Any advice you would give to newer entrepreneurs, something you wish you knew?
Where do I start? There's a ton. There's a lot of lessons. For new entrepreneurs, I'd say be very knowledge thirsty. Have an unquenchable desire to learn. Learn both related topics and discrete, very unrelated topics. And I'll just share some examples. The story of Sam Colt. He made the Colt gun, COLT. It started out, he was a teenager that liked things like dynamite and always got into trouble. His dad said, well, I'm going to put you on a ship so you can go and cool off a little bit and get out of trouble. And while he was on the ship, I didn't know how to describe it, but he saw this circular thing on the ship. I think, this is 500 years ago, the thing that you use in turning it. So it's like a circle with jagged edges on the outside circumference of the circle. That's like the best way I can describe it. I wouldn't really call it like a star shape, was like a circle with some jagged tooth outside of it, right? And so in his mind, he's wow, this is what I've been looking for. And from what he just saw, he made the connection that this is the mechanism he could leverage in order to improve something that could shoot ammunition several times before reloading. So this was the birth of the ability of a gun to shoot multiple times before reloading. That was the birth. So, I've been looking at a lot of innovation stories and how things got started, and this is those that I remember, or even the Wright brothers. They were competing with somebody else who was very well funded in New York, but the Wright brothers won because A, they really wanted to soak up knowledge. They asked the Smithsonian to send them every scrap of paper ever written about aerodynamics or fluid, because air is fluid and they needed an aerodynamic shape like a bird in order to move through air. And so they had the desire for the knowledge, but also their why. You hear, all those big time entrepreneurs ask you, what's your why are you doing what you're doing? So their why was so great that no matter what obstacle they faced, they persevered through it. And that's what got them to be the first known people to fly, at least in America. And there are other stories like the founder story. I think it's on Netflix, the story of McDonald's. It was two brothers and San Bernardino, and there were other burger joints at that time. But these two brothers took the time to perfect their process and optimize it. And how they did that was realize that the frying station, the station where you grill the burger, where you start the buns, where you start the condiments, where the shake machine stood, where the soda machine stood. When they started, people were bumping into each other, and that bumping into each other translated into the time to bring out the food. And so they went to a tennis court. I remember this very vividly from the movie. They went to a tennis court and they started placing locations on the tennis court to see, okay, if we place the burgers here and we grill here and place the fry here, what about you move around? And they did this for several weeks till they perfected the exact locations to put things and where the workers will move seamlessly and the food will come out quickly. So I'd just say have the ability to just learn, because it could be something you saw something very unrelated that could help you make a connection to something that you're working on, or it could be something related. Read books. Can't read physical books like myself, well, gravitate towards Kindle, gravitate towards audiobooks, books like Start Your Own Corporation, Talking to Humans, The Mom Test, Innovator's Dilemma, and there are even services now. And I'm not promoting any service, nobody's paying me, but there are services that actually crunch the time and teach the lessons of a book in about 15 minutes. Just have that desire to learn. There are so many different lessons, but this is one big one, because you never know where you can get that spark, that one little piece of thing that just makes everything open up wide open and accelerate things for you.
Thank you so much, Zuby. I actually remember that exact scene from the movie The Founder about McDonald's. I think I agree that was fascinating. And I think it shows, as you said, like how you need to be willing to learn new things and find whatever approaches you can to learning new skills. Now, we have a question from one of the listeners, which was, one of the most common obstacles for assistive technologies related to healthcare are requirements, regulations, validation, and clinical trials. How do you plan to overcome these obstacles? Any strategy?
Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a policymaker or a politician. Yeah, it really is a spaghetti mess. I haven't faced that obstacle immediately, but one potential way to at least start getting a foot into the door, I can talk about an experience that I had. I participated in the Mass Challenge Health Technology vertical. Mass Challenge is a non-profit incubator, so that means they don't take equity, and they have different verticals. This one is called Health Technology. This specific program, the Mass Challenge Health Tech, the specific program has a unique model. The model is unique in the sense that they already have established partners. For example, a Boston Children's Medical. So now their established partners put out what they call reverse pitches. So BCM could put out a 5-minute audio saying, hey, these are some of the things we are looking at this year. And then Mass Challenge starts looking for startups working in that area. And so if you get into Mass Challenge Health Tech, they will pair you with Boston Student Medical, where rather than you having to, run around the whole place and looking for introductions, you're already paired with this institution. And if you have something that's pilot ready, you're good to go. That's a route that can help a startup cut through all of the red tape and all of those barriers. So that's one that I personally know because I participated in the.
Can I ask, was it helpful? I know when you started, it was literally pre COVID. and then it went virtual early after you started. So, was it helpful being virtual? Like, was it still as helpful as they had claimed it would be?
Well, can't really put the COVID on them, right? I think they did their best in retooling very quickly because the program had been running for years and was totally designed in person. And so you get to miss a lot of those in person meetings and interactions. They did field a lot of speakers and they did make a lot of introductions, but they could only do the best they could under the circumstances. Although Think and Zoom won Startup Choice Award, because of COVID, it didn't pack, the prize money punch it typically would. So, COVID situation was, I'd say, out of their hands, but I'd say they did the best they could under the circumstances, quickly retool and go virtual. And they were very fast in making introductions.
Thanks so much for that explanation, Zuby. And thanks, Adriana, for the great follow up question. I feel like we've learned so much in just a short time, but I'd love to end by kind of asking you if you have anything that you would list as a best lesson or takeaway from your journey so far, Zuby. It can be, words of wisdom someone else gave you or a quote that you like.
Best lesson, takeaway, quote that I like. One that comes to mind is "It always seems impossible until it is done" by Nelson Mandela. A lot of times you're trying to do things and the people around you may not be able to see it. The rejections keep coming. I think Robin Hood famously is known for having gone through rejections. That's how their story goes. You then just have to rely on a lot of internal convictions and willpower, then always fall back on your why. Why are you even doing this in the first place? Just remember that on your journey, your why has to be stronger than anything else so that it can allow you to persevere, to last through all the bumps and all the bruises, along the journey and all the barriers that you have to climb over. Then reach out, connect to people, all the greats. I have been discovering that they kind of had a lot of help along the way and had a lot of deeply networked people. I call them concentric circles of networks. So not just one circle, but concentric. If you think about concentric circles all around, just expanding, they had different networks that help them out. So that's also an asset that can help advance the entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you. I think you gave us multiple points there. I love that Nelson Mandela quote. And I also like your quote. I just put it on the questions and discussion channel. Your why has to be stronger than anything else. I think that's actually something that I learned or relearned for myself this past year. So that one resonates with me. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all your thoughts and everything you've shared with us and taught us today, Zuby. And I'd also like to really thank everyone that joined us this week and on an ongoing basis for bringing your perspective and energy to today's discussion. Spencer and I and Founders Voyage team feel very fortunate to be part of this community and for the opportunity to bring these sorts of cooperative learning experiences to you on a weekly basis. So please keep it fresh in our minds as to how we can, make Discord and Founders Voyage a better place for these sorts of ongoing, meaningful discussions and collaborations. Zuby, thanks again. And everyone, we hope you have a great day and evening ahead.
Thanks so much for having me and have a great weekend, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Zuby.
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.